Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schwab Coaching. My name is Cameron May. I'm a Senior Manager of Trading and Derivatives Education here at Schwab, and this is Getting Started with Thinkorswim. And over the last 4 sessions, we've been going through a series of lessons that I've created that are intended to bring a new user of Thinkorswim right up to speed with how to use that platform. We've been going through a lot of the functions and features. Last time in lesson 4, we went through the charts tool, and today we're getting on to this scan tool. It can be frustrating to know what we're looking for in a specific stock, but sometimes a trader doesn't know where or how to look. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, running scans on Thinkorswim, running searches or screens or filters, but we call them scans. Should be a great discussion. Before we get to that, though, let me first of all say hello to everybody who's already chatting in. Great to see all of you, all the familiar names, as always. Hello there, Scott and Andrew, Ricebird, Neva, Sharon, everybody else. Thanks for joining us week after week. We always do appreciate your attendance and your contributions to these discussions. If you're here for the very first time, I want to welcome you as well. I'll have some pointers for you. If you happen to miss the first 4 lessons, that's okay. You can start with lesson 5. It's not going to hurt anything. I'll just show you where to find those other 4. I also want to let anyone know who's watching on the YouTube archive after this live show is concluded. Enjoy the presentation, but be aware that you're invited to join us in the live discussion. If you'd like to be here, this is a Wednesday webcast series. We kick things off promptly at 2 Eastern time. We'd love to have you here in the live stream audience. And as a treat for my live stream audience members right now, I have my very good friend Kevin Horners hanging out in the chats. He's going to be addressing any questions that I can't get to, just during the natural flow of the presentation. As long as those questions aren't too far off topic, Kevin's there to help me pick up the slack. So thanks for having my back there, Kevin. Kevin and I would also like to issue an invitation to everybody listening. If you have an account on the platform known as X, you should be following your favorite presenters on X. It's the best place to connect with your favorite presenters. You can follow Kevin there at Kevin Horner CS, and you can find me on X at Cameron May CS. I've spent a good portion of this morning just going to X and checking on comments on my posts, replying to those. So yeah, best place to connect with me when the camera's not on. But let's get right into this. And as we do, of course, we need to consider the risks associated with trading and investing. These risks are real. So bear these important disclosures in mind. The information here is for general informational purposes only. It should not be considered an individualized recommendation or endorsement of any particular security, chart pattern, or investment strategy. Options carry a high level of risk and are not suitable for all investors. Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as sole means of investment research, and investing involves risks, including the loss of principal. All right, so let's get into this discussion. And as I mentioned last time, in lesson 4, we went through getting acquainted with the Thinkorswim charting tool, very powerful tool. If you happen to miss that or the other 3 lessons, let me show you where those are found, and then we'll come back here to the Thinkorswim desktop and get into that scan function. But yeah, if this is your first time watching one of our webcasts, or if for other reasons you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, do that right now. You can go down, click on the subscribe button. It's down there in the lower right-hand corner. It literally only takes a second. It doesn't cost anything. But our YouTube channel is where we house all of our previous webcasts, including the webcasts that we've done in this series so far. So to find that, we just go to YouTube, look for Trader Talks Schwab Coaching Webcasts, and then here on the homepage, we're going to go to the Playlist tab, the playlist screen, and I can just scroll all the way down. Mine happens to be the very last one out of all the series. There it is, all the way down at the bottom, Getting Started with Thinkorswim. If I click on View Full Playlist, you're going to see in reverse chronological order, there's lesson 4, lesson 3, lesson 2, and lesson 1. All right, so let's go get acquainted with Thinkorswim Scan tab. Now, if you're not familiar with this platform, I'm using Thinkorswim. It's a desktop software that can be downloaded from within your Schwab Online account. You just go to the Trade tab. Once you've logged into Schwab Online, go to schwab.com, log in, click on the Trade tab, look for Thinkorswim, click on that, and then just sort of follow the on-screen prompts. There'll be a big blue button. Click on that. It'll guide you through the process. But that downloads the software to your laptop or your computer. It creates a Thinkorswim icon on your computer's desktop. It puts Thinkorswim in your computer start menu. And then you just launch the software, log in using your Schwab username and password, and you'll find yourself right where we are. We can go to the charts from here. I'm going to go to the Scan tab, and let's just go left to right, top to bottom, just as I like to do. We try to be as comprehensive in these discussions as I can. Now, I can't cover every single tool. So, for example, we have screeners, these scan tools that are for stock screening, for option screening. There's something known as a spread hacker, the spread book, the ISE spread book. I'm not going to be going into these others in any great detail today. Instead, we're going to be spending our time on the stock hacker, but the skills acquired here will definitely help us with the navigation and the usage of those other tools, which you can just explore on your own after we've concluded things today. But yeah, the stock hacker is the scan tool that let's say a trader just has specific characteristics for the kind of stocks that they choose to invest or trade, but they want to be able to tell Thinkorswim, hey, go out and find these kinds of stocks for me, and then just list them for me. That's what our scan tool is capable of doing. So I'm going to do that using the stock hacker. Now, just on the line below that, we're going to see that we can scan through all stocks out there. And there are 11,000 stocks that we could scan through, or we could direct the scan to specific corners of the marketplace. So instead of scanning in all stocks, I could bring up a requirement like, let's just scan in a personal watch list, see if some of my watch list stocks are meeting specific criteria right now, or we can go to a public watch list, like scanning just through the component companies of the S&P 500. But for today's example, we're going to be scanning in all stocks, okay? Now, additionally, instead of just scanning in one group of stocks, we can sort of put together a Venn diagram. If you know what that is, it's when you have overlapping circles and the shared space in the middle and the overlap are characteristics that are shared by both hemispheres anyway. But in any case, we can scan in one corner of the marketplace and maybe additionally see if there's an overlapping corner of the marketplace. So for example, maybe a trader wants to scan for stocks that are in the S&P 500, but maybe also those that are in the, I don't know, the Dow Jones as an example. So we could intersect with another corner. I'm not going to be doing that today. Just wanted to point out that that's a possibility. And we could also explicitly exclude specific corners of the marketplace by using this menu. Now, the menus are all the same. Just one is to scan in, the other one is to intersect with, and the other one is to exclude. All right, so now we're going to come down here and start to fill out a scan. This is I guess we'd call it a stock scan, but by default, we're going to have the option to choose from default menus of specific stock characteristics. So you'll notice right here, there are 3 default menus. The first one set by default to net change, the second one to volume, and then finally to percent change. That doesn't mean that we're locked into only using 3 criteria. We can add some, and we will as we go along, but let's use these default menus first. And as we do, I want you to note the impact, first of all, to this blue box over here with the histogram sort of partially obscured behind it. And then also keep an eye on the potential matches over here. So for example, let's choose our first specific criteria. And how about for this example, let's use market cap for number 1. Market capitalization is just the size of the company as measured by stock price and stock shares. So if we have a high price stock with lots of shares, we multiply those together, and that creates that identifies a very large company. So for example, if we have a stock that's trading at $100 per share, and there are, let's say, well, this wouldn't be a large stock, but 100 shares, $100 share per share, and there are, let's say, 1 million shares out there, that would be a $100 million company. That would actually fit securely in the small cap category, maybe even tilting toward micro cap, but really market capitalization, just a measure of the size of a company, price per share times the number of shares. In any case, 2 billion or fewer is generally seen as a small cap company. 2 billion to 10 billion is a mid cap company, and 10 billion or larger, generally a large cap company. And let's say that our hypothetical investor here is looking at least for mid-range, mid cap. Let's say they decide to go with 5,000 million. Notice our market capitalization here is expressed in millions of dollars. So 5,000 million would be a $5 billion company. Now, out of a potential of nearly 12,000 companies out there, how many are actually $5 billion companies? There are about 2,700, still a good number of companies. But already our scan tool, our stock hacker, is starting to narrow the field of potential candidates according to the metrics, according to the characteristics designated by the investor themselves. So let's narrow that field down further. And as we do, you'll also see this histogram has this blue window on it. And what that's doing for us is giving us a visual idea of how many stocks meet our criteria and how many do not. So the highlighted blue area is telling us, just eyeballing this, looks like maybe a third, maybe a quarter of companies. We know that from the numbers. 2,700 is just about exactly a quarter of all the companies out there. But we can see that visually here, and we can also manipulate the upper range and the lower range by moving our window within that histogram. So as an example, let me click on the left margin of this blue window and drag it to the left. And you'll notice that's reducing our minimum market capitalization requirement. Or if I come over here and click on the rightmost side, drag that to the left, it's going to start reducing the upper range of the market capitalization accepted. So for example, now I've settled in on $174 million as a minimum, just randomly, with it looks like $43 billion as the maximum for that searchable range. Now, I'm just going to actually zip that maximum back up to where it was. Let's put in our 5,000 million. In other words, our 5 billion is our minimum again. And there are 2,700 matches. But I think that's nifty that we can use that little tool visually. If we're not sure how many companies might fall within a range, it can help us zero in on that. This can also help us identify a culprit. If we built a scan and we're getting no results or very few results, and then we look up here and we see, oh, one of the criteria that we selected has a very narrow range or a very limited number of companies that meet that criteria, it directs our eye right to where we probably need to be a little bit more accommodating. So Rona says, where did you see the maximum number? So it's right over here, Rona. So we go from minimum to maximum, and we can set those, just manually type them in, or we can drag that window within, that overlays the histogram. All right, so now that we know how to use that, let's add some more criteria. These are just as examples. Let's say for our second criteria here, we're going to use the default menu. Maybe we're a value investor, and that value investor is looking for stocks with a relatively low PE ratio. That's price to earnings over the last 12 months, current price to earnings over the last 12 months. And for some traders, they prefer not to buy when prices are really high compared to the earnings or revenue for the company. Now, that might lead you to think, well, then why are we setting a low here? Why a minimum? If I put a minimum of 8 here, we're literally saying, I don't want to pay less than $8 per share for every $1 of earnings over the last 12 months. Well, why not? Well, for some traders, if that price is really low when earnings have been really strong, that might be to them a red flag. And the common interpretation there is that historical earnings has not impressed investors. Maybe they're concerned about what next year's earnings might be rather than last year's earnings. In any case, let's just put a low here for an example of 8. And how about we put a high here of 20, a multiple of no more than 20 current price compared to earnings over the last 12 months. And as we move on to our next criteria, we'll notice, okay, there are 2,374 companies. This little window are the companies that have PE ratio between 8 and 20. And there's going to be some overlap between the 2,374 that meet this criteria and the 2,718 that meet this criteria. Now let's add a third potential criteria. How about we say our our value investor also is looking for some dividends. Average dividends are a little bit less than 2% right now. So how about we go to our menu here. Let's choose yield. Dividend yield is the size of the dividend being paid on an annualized basis. And let's say, as a minimum, we want at least a little bit above average. Now, a very high dividend to some investors may be unsustainable in the long term. It may signal some risk down the road to the company. Dividends can be expensive for a company to keep up with. Let's just sort of exaggerate things. This is not outside the realm of possibility. But let's say a company has declared a 15% dividend on an ongoing basis. That means their objective is to deliver 15% payout to shareholders annually from every dollar that's generated 15% on the value of their stock per share. That's tough. That's a big check to write, and it may not be sustainable. It may, to some, mean that the company is doing something desperate and they're not careful, and they don't care to mess with that. But it's always up to the individual investor. These are just example ranges, but in any case, let's set our example range between 2 and 6%, and about 2,000 companies meet all three of those criteria. So if we run a scan now, let me just click scan. Let's see how many companies meet all three. Looks like we're seeing the top 50, and these are just in alphabetical order. I don't mean to say they're the best 50, just happen to be the first 50. Out of 586, we've narrowed the field from nearly 12,000 companies to about 586 that are paying a yield between 2 and 6% currently. They have a PE ratio between 8 and 20, and they are a mid-cap or larger company. Now, here's where a new user of the scan tool might think that they've hit a brick wall. Uh-oh, I don't have any more criteria to choose from. That's okay. We can actually add additional filters right up here, and we can add filters of different types. Let me click on this Add Filter tool, and you'll notice it presents us with a menu to add more stock filters. Notice these are currently labeled stock filters. They're specific to equities. We can add option filters. I'm not going to be doing that today, but be aware we could. We can add fundamental filters, which is sort of a deeper dive into the quote unquote health of the company behind the stock. We have study filters, which is searching for specific technical patterns on a stock chart, or we have pattern filters, which are looking at price behavior on a stock chart. So we can, let's use at least a couple of these. Let's use 3 of these. I'm going to go up here and add, let's say, another stock filter. And maybe our trader, they're looking for medium cap companies, PE ratios between 8 and 20, yield between 2 and 6%. And maybe they want, let's say, the last trading price, the last price at which the stock is traded, be at least $50. Some traders just prefer, some investors prefer not to deal with lower price securities. Obviously, it's just a hypothetical. It's just an example for how to use the tool. But let's add that. And it looks like another 2,200 companies meet that criteria. In other words, out of 12,000 companies, there are about 10,000 that are priced under $50 right now, despite stocks being at all-time highs. Those are probably some pretty small companies. But in any case, we can add additional stock filters, or let's add a fundamental filter. Fundamental filter, as I mentioned before, this is looking at the fundamentals of a company. It's setting stock charts aside and looking at value metrics, growth metrics, those kinds of things. And let's say that our hypothetical investor here, we've already filtered for dividends and price to earnings, but what about earnings per share, just bottom line? Let's go to let's do earnings per share, TTM. What does TTM stand for? That means trailing 12 months, the earnings of the company over the last 12 months. And let's say that our investor is looking for at least $1 in earnings. That might not sound like a lot, but keep an eye on our histogram here, as I just set $1 as our minimum. And that looks like, yeah, there's a big batch of companies that are earning less than $1 over the last 12 months. But just note that as we select from the fundamental menu, it's a lot of different values that can be selected here, different criteria, different from what we've seen as defaults in the stock filters. All right, now finally, let's maybe add a study filter. If you didn't follow along what the study filter is, this is making direct reference to behaviors on a stock chart as measured by technical indicators. So we're going to be looking for a behavior from a technical indicator. So I'm going to choose the study here. And actually, rather than using, I'll use technical indicators in just a moment. How about we just look at where price is relative to 52-week highs and lows? So we can just make specific requirements of what we want from the stock chart in this case. So the one that I'm going to be using is known as price performance. How has price been performing recently? And as I do, note the rest of the menu. There are lots of other studies that we can choose. Candlestick patterns, crossovers using moving averages, popular studies like MACD and on balance volume and RSI and stochastic and all of those things that a lot of you are familiar with. Let me go to just price performance. And I'm going to choose as our example here, near high lows. So this is specifically a filter that looks to see where is the current price relative to 52-week highs or lows. Now we could change that time frame, but by default, this is going to be looking for a current price that is within 3% of the, what does this mean? 252 period high. Well, a period refers to the length of a candle. Some candles, if we're looking at an hourly chart, it's an hourly candle. If we're looking at a weekly chart, it's a weekly candle. If we're looking at a daily chart, it's a daily candle. And the period here specifically is D. You'll notice the D over here, that's for a day. So 252 days, 252 trading days is one calendar year. We have weekends, we have holidays. Average, the average trading year has 252 or 251 trading days. That's why this rather random looking number is the default. So if we just went with the default here, we'd be looking for companies that meet all of these criteria that are also trading right up near all-time highs. Maybe our trader has a preference for stocks that have been going up. Let's be a little bit more accommodating here. How about we say within 5% of those 252, I shouldn't say all-time highs, but within 5% of the annual highs. So there we go. We've added 6 criteria here. Before I hit scan, I want to prepare us emotionally for something. Lots of investors and traders have lots of ideas about what constitutes the perfect company or the perfect stock and the perfect combination of stock characteristics. Sometimes perfection is unattainable, however we choose to define it. And if we go stacking up a bunch of different criteria, or we're very demanding with specific criteria, pretty quickly, the list of potential candidates evaporates to 0. So just know, if that's the case, if you build a scan and you run that scan and you get no results, it's not the scan is broken. It's just that probably nothing fit all of the criteria. That's definitely a possibility. I think we'll be okay here. Let's click scan. Let's see what we get. And as that's working, I want to check over here in the chat. See, it looks like we have 29 companies that meet all of these criteria. All right, so 2 continents and 1 island says, how would you scan for companies who would be good candidates for a good risk-reward ratio when considering credit spreads? That's a good question, can be done, but that would be using either the option hacker or the spread hacker. And I'm not going to go down that path because then I have to talk about, this is the difficulty in demonstrating those tools. I have to be speaking to a very specific audience, or I have to teach the audience what I'm doing. And that's a lot to discuss, you know. A good risk to reward. What is good with a credit spread? Are we talking about high reward credit spread or high probability credit spread? So yeah, in any case, yeah, that one, it's a great question, but I'm going to step away from that, let you experiment. Just know that use the skills that you've built here and then go look for, maybe you have a preferred delta or something like that that's going to be available in the other hackers. Okay. But looks like we have a good list of companies down here. And one thing that we do know about each one of these is that they meet all of these criteria. And as a matter of fact, let's just take one. How about we take the first one, Bank of Nova Scotia. According to our scan, it should be a medium cap company or larger, with a PE ratio between 8 and 20, a yield between 2 and 6%, a price of at least $50. We can see all of that is adding up right there. Earnings per share of at least $1 over the last 12 months. And it should also be trading right up near its 12-month highs. Let's look at a chart of BNS. What do you think? Is that stock trading up near those all-time highs, or those 12-month highs, I should say, 252 trading periods on a daily chart, in other words, a one-year chart? Yeah, this scan has done its job. Is that a guarantee that this stock is going higher still? No, it's not a guarantee. No, nobody can deliver that promise. But what we can say is it found what we were looking for. Now, a couple of other features I wanted to show here is that if we built a scan and we want to save that scan, we can go up here to the menus up here at the top and choose Save Scan Query. So you'll notice that's the second menu from the upper right. The little dots and dashes are menus. We can save this, give it any meaningful name that we think will be meaningful to us next time we want to run a similar scan. But how about we call this one, Value Income Stocks Near Highs. However we want to call it. If we save that scan, and then we click, watch this. This is going to make your heart race a little bit. If I hit reset, this is going to erase everything, and we're going to go back to those three default criteria. It's making sure, Cameron, are you sure you want to delete this? Yeah, I want to delete this scan. So now we're back here. Let's say we shut down Thinkorswim. We come back a week from now and we want to rerun that same scan. We don't want to have to rebuild the whole thing from scratch. Well, we're just going to go back up to where we saved it, and we're going to load that, what's called a scan query, and it's a personal one. And you'll notice there's our value income stocks near highs. Now, another benefit to doing this, let me just load that up. You'll notice this is ready now to rerun that scan. An additional benefit to that is when we save that, we can also load that up as a watch list over here. Let's go to our personal watch list, and you notice we can load up our value income stocks near highs, and there's that watch list of stocks currently meeting those criteria. Didn't have to do anything special. That just automatically happens. All right, now, that's one feature that I wanted to show, is that save scan query feature, but also the reset feature if we just want to start from a blank slate again. But maybe we just want to remove one of these tools and replace it with one of our criteria, replace it with another one. Well, you'll notice there's a little X over here to the right. Let's take off this one, the near high lows. And I'm going to replace that one. Let's add another study. But this time I want to customize things. We're going to get a little bit fancy. How many of you have used this custom feature under the studies filter? This takes us to what's known as the condition wizard. Oh, that's kind of a cool name. But by default, it's going to give us the ADX crossover. I think that's just because it's the first study in alphabetical order. Let's just delete that. It doesn't know what we want by default. But let's add a condition. And let's say, maybe before I do this, let me do this. Let's set up a hypothetical. Let's say that we have a technically oriented investor or a trader. Maybe they're using a combination of trend lines. Here's a fairly common combination. Let's say we're looking at simple moving averages. I'm going to add a couple of these to our chart. So I'm on the charts tab. If you didn't see our demonstration from last week to follow along with what I'm doing, you may want to check out that lesson. I showed how to find it earlier in the video. But in any case, I'm going to add a couple of trend lines, a couple of moving averages, and we're going to use just a hypothetical crossover system. All right. But let's say we're using a short-term moving average, let's say 10 days in length. I'm gonna make that one red. And against that, we're using an intermediate term moving average. Let's leave that one green. I'll make that one a little bit thicker. So if somebody can't, if we can't visually see the difference between red and green, some people, they can't see the difference in colors very well. I'll just make the longer term moving average is going to be a little bit thicker. So let's click OK and click Apply. Click OK again. And here are our two trend lines. Now, when using moving averages, they can serve a couple of purposes. Number one is they may indicate trends of different lengths. They may also indicate areas of support and resistance, price floors and price ceiling. But when using a shorter term trend against an intermediate term trend, a trader is sometimes looking to see our shorter term strengthening enough that it's crossing up and through the intermediate. So for example, we got a crossover of the 10 coming up through the 50 right there. And for some traders, that might signify that we're seeing a reversal of price that may turn out to be longer term in nature. And so they're looking for what's called a crossover. In this case, we're just using the 10 and the 50 as examples, but that's just to illustrate what we're looking for. Now, notice right now our 10 is well above the 50, so not a recent signal on the S&P 500, but maybe our trader wants to scan for stocks that have generated a recent crossover signal. Well, that's what we're going to be doing here in our scan. So let's go to our study. I'm going to build that custom scan just from a blank slate. Let's delete this one and add a condition. And this is just very menu driven. To me, it's fairly intuitive. We can't do anything on this screen other than go up here and click on the little menu. And then we make a choice. All right, well, this is going to be a study screen. So let's choose study. We were using simple moving averages. So I'm going to look for simple. Let's add a simple moving average. And then as I scroll down through, it's going to ask us, well, what's the length of our moving average? We were looking at a 10. And then what do we want this 10 to do? Well, we want it to be, let me scroll up just a bit. Our 10 crosses above what? Another study. Which study? Another simple moving average. What length of moving average? A 50. And then finally, when? Down here at the bottom, with this custom tool, we can say, I want to see a 10-period moving average that has crossed above a 50-period moving average within the last 5 bars, or in other words, the last 5 days. So let's click Save and click OK. And now we have, okay, our 10 is crossing above the 50 within 5 days. So now let's run a scan. I don't know what we're going to get here. Let's run a scan. Let's see what we get here. All right, it looks like we have 10 companies that meet all of the first 5 criteria, and they're also showing a recent crossover. Now, if you didn't follow how a crossover system works, that's okay. This is just a tool demonstration. I'm not trying to teach you how to do investing. That's going to vary from one trader to the next. I'm just demonstrating the capabilities of the tool. You can experiment with these on your own. But let's go see. Let's take one. How about a Consolidated Edison here? Let's go to the charts. Let's bring up old Ed. And what do we see right there? Looks like there was a crossover back here. Consolidated Edison. And there's just within the last 5 days, and as a matter of fact, it looks within about the last 48 hours, that 10 is crossing up over the 50. And for a technical trader who values a set of fundamental characteristics like the ones that we've outlined in our scan, that may be an interest signal. Of course, they may take into consideration things like a pending earnings announcement, but this scan has done its job. So we're getting well acquainted with the tool. Let's just look at a few other things that we can do here. We can show, rather than 50, we can show 200 in a list. We can show 500, 1,000. Obviously, if we have lots of results, we're not narrowing down the field very much. Maybe the trader wants to be a little bit more demanding of their criteria up here. I'm going to leave that at 50. but we could display more than 50 down below. By default, it's going to sort them by symbol just over here. But we can also sort them by, let me click on this, all sorts of different things. Like PE ratio is important to us. We can sort by PE. We can look using the same screens and filters that we applied up here. We can show them in ascending order, going from maybe lowest price to highest price as an example, or lowest in alphabetical order up to highest in alphabetical order, or descending. Now, the final thing that I want to show is that even the columns down below can be customized. So for example, let's see if we can pick something out here. We have our last, we have our yield. If we have our PE ratio here anywhere? Nope. PE ratio is not currently displayed. So if our trader wants to be able to see the PE ratio in their list of columns down below, we can click on the little gears over here to the right. This is our customize field, and we can just look for PE. Let's see, what is the, I think it's actually spelled out as price in this example. Am I missing it? I don't think so. There it is. There it is. It was just being a little bit finicky. But let's add this as one of our columns. And by default, it'll be the last column, which would position it furthest to the right. Let's move that up. Maybe let's put it up here next to yield. Since it's one of our search criteria, let's bring it all the way up. Of yield and then PE. Let's just click OK. And you'll notice here is now our PE. And we could even sort by PE. So another feature of this scan tool is that the columns are individually sortable. So right now we're looking at highest yield down to lowest. If I click on PE, I can see highest PE to lowest or lowest PE to highest. And you'll see that PE, the lowest PE here, is not under 8 because we set that as a minimum. All right. Guys, we've actually accomplished everything that I set out to do today. We've gone left to right, top to bottom, built a custom search, or built a custom scan, including using the custom feature within the scan tool. I hope this has been helpful to you. We'll continue in this lesson series next week. But here's what we have coming up. We just went through the scan tab for lesson 5. Next week, we're going to be moving on to the market watch tab. A lot of tools that we're going to be exploring there. I hope you put it in your calendar to join me. That'll be next Wednesday. Again, that's at 2 o'clock Eastern. We'd love to have you here in the live stream. You can just watch the recording too if you prefer. But I also want to call your attention to other resources outside of this webcast series. We have webcasts going on all day, every trading day of the week. And so if you haven't done this already, make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. YouTube channel name is Trader Talks Schwab Coaching Webcast. You can go down in the lower right-hand corner and click on the subscribe button. It only takes a second, doesn't cost anything. This is where we house our playlists of previous webcasts. You can join the live streams here, or if you have a specific topic of interest, you can just do a search right there. Now, another thing that Kevin and I invite you to do is to follow us on X. X is the best place to connect with your favorite presenters in between these live streams. You can find Kevin on X at Kevin Horner CS. You can find me on X at Cameron May CS. So as an example of the sorts of things that you might see here, I threw out a quick reminder this morning that the FOMC announcement was at 2 o'clock Eastern today. That was during this webcast. And I wanted to see what people had as their expectations, and people have been commenting on this. And I've been replying to those comments earlier today. But you might also see, what am I doing on the weekend? Really is the best place to connect with your favorite presenters. That also doesn't cost you anything. Just give us a quick follow there. Great resource. Kevin, thanks for helping out in chats. Everybody, thanks for the thumbs up that everyone has given so far. I can see that there are still 86 people watching, which is fabulous. 38 have already clicked that thumbs up button just down below the video window right now. when you do that, it's like patting your presenter on the back, thanking them for a job well done if you think the job was well done. But it also promotes that presenter's webcast in the YouTube algorithm, helps more people find these sorts of webcasts, and helps them learn things like how to use the Thinkorswim Scan tab. All right, everybody, I don't think, let me quickly scroll up through here. Yeah, I don't see a survey today. Thanks again, Kevin, for helping out. Ricebird says, was I trading at the pool? No, I wasn't trading there, but it was 90 degrees outside. What did I do? I went to the hot tub. Yeah, still was great. In any case, I'll see you in a future webcast. I'll also look for you on X, but whenever I see you again, until that moment arrives, I want to wish you the very best of luck. Happy trading. Bye-bye.